We began talking about ag policy this morning with Dr. Amy Hagerman. And Amy, we spend some time every year at this time looking back on the year that was and kind of reflecting and then looking ahead. So we're going to do that with you today and just kind of a big recap of 2025 in your arena of ag policy. A lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about in 2025 in ag policy. A lot of changes were made. It's a new administration and with a new Congress. And with that comes a lot of changes, generally speaking. But especially this year, we've had a lot of changes. Those have been things everywhere from trade policy and the implications of tariffs to the passage of several major pieces of legislation. And then also, I think we do have to talk about some of the administrative changes that have happened as well within USDA and how that's changing programs out here, boots on the ground in the field. So just a lot of moving parts this year for sure.
Let's kind of dive in and chunk this off a little bit at a time, starting with farm programs.
Yeah, so we got to start then with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed in July, was signed into law in July. That had a lot of the big changes we were looking for in a farm bill. So if we look at our commodity programs, Title I, the agricultural risk coverage and price loss coverage program, crop insurance changes, conservation changes, we saw a lot in that bill. Some of the biggest things, I think, affecting the 2025 crop year, because this has been a tough market year for prices, as you're having other people talk about reflecting back on 2025. And when we look at those programs, it's going to be the highest of the ARC and PLC payment rates for the 2025 crop year. This is pretty important because price loss coverage hasn't really triggered in previous higher crop price years, but especially with those higher reference prices that we saw under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I would expect that we would probably see some payments triggering for the 2025 crop year. But of course, those payments don't arrive in producers' bank accounts until the end of 2026.
Let's talk now about conservation programs and what producers may want to keep in mind.
Yeah, there's also been some changes in this space. So the One Big Beautiful Bill Act took some of the Inflation Reduction Act money from 2022, pulled it into the Farm Bill baseline, but then shifted the remaining Inflation Reduction Act funds into other places. What this means is that overall, we'll see a reduction in the total dollars spent for conservation programs in 2026, but going forward into the future, it'll still be higher than what we would have expected under the 2018 baseline. Also, just very recently, USDA announced a new Regenerative Agriculture Initiative program. This looks very similar to producers. It's going to feel very familiar. It's using the EQIP and CSP programs that they're familiar with. And it's also promoting some of the same conservation practices that they're familiar with. The big difference, I think, is that there's a requirement for soil testing at the beginning and end of those 5-year contracts. And of course, the folks in OSU Extension are always there to provide that expertise and that service to producers who need it to use some of these conservation programs going forward into the future. So we'll be watching that one to see exactly how that's implemented, since it's a fairly recently announced change.
So many headlines this year on so many topics, but the government shutdown has to have generated the most coverage of everything, and it really kind of went on and on.
Yes.
And especially the SNAP program. Kind of what are our takeaways for the year, and again, that planning ahead, looking toward the future as well.
Yeah, this administration came in with an intent to make some big changes to SNAP. And as we came into this Congress, also there was an intent to make some big changes to SNAP. And we've seen some of those changes that have been under discussion for several years. First, we saw the changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. SNAP received the largest cut of any of the Farm Bill programs in that bill. And those cuts are going to be in a couple of different ways. The first is the able-bodied working adults change. That has already been implemented. Anyone between the ages of 18 and 64, it was raised from 54 to 64 at that top end, will be required to have work or volunteer hours in order to be eligible for SNAP benefits. Another change that was more recently implemented here in Oklahoma is a shift away from certain foods that could be purchased with SNAP benefits. So anything that is a sugary food like a candy or even a sweetened drink, which would include lemonade, sweet tea, and Gatorade, will no longer be eligible for SNAP benefits going forward in the future.
And then late this year, the announcement of this bridge program, we've talked about it a little bit, but again, what should producers keep in mind and prepare for in the year ahead?
Yeah, as we're looking forward to 2026, I think a lot of producers are feeling the crunch now from the changes in prices, from the higher costs of production. And this is specifically our row crop producers. There are a couple of programs I think that could be beneficial here. Now, in 2025, we had the Emergency Commodity Assistance Program, or ECAP. That program was based kind of on losses that were experienced in previous years. Now we're going to have this Farmer Bridge program, which we don't have exact payment rates out on yet. But if I look at the program, I think it looks pretty similar to the ECAP program. And even if we look at the spending set aside for the Farmer Bridge program, it's a pretty similar level to what we saw for the ECAP program. So I expect to see something fairly similar to that. This is something that producers are not going to have to go in and apply for as long as you have your crop production records up to date with your Farm Service Agency office. That's something that they're going to send you the filled out application, and that payment is expected to hit bank accounts at the end of February.
All right, Amy, we're so glad we have you to stay on top of things and sort this out for us. And of course, we'll have you back on as many times as we need to. Happy New Year to you and your family, and we wish you all the best in 2026.
Thank you.